Welcome to the Lila Life Show. I'm your host, Linda Andrews, and I am so excited for our episode today. I have Dr. Jessie Hehmeyer with us, also known as Dr. H. She is the doctor and behind Well Empowered, founder of Well Empowered, and a functional medicine physician. Welcome to the show, Dr. Hehmeyer. So happy to have you here today.
Thank you so much, Linda. It's such a pleasure to be here with you and your community.
Yes, we're going to dive in, and this topic around functional medicine, nutrition, overall well-being, specifically helping founders, but really helping anyone. That's my aim of our show. And there's always little gems that come up to the forefront. I'd love to hear the short or long version, just what got you on this path and why you are so passionate about this work.
Yeah, well, I like to say straight lines are boring,
Yes.
right? So that from a high level describes my journey. But for me, I remember, graduating college. I went to UCLA undergrad and got my degree in sociology. And to tell you the truth, Linda, I studied sociology because it worked really well for my workout schedule. So that should have been a good tip right there, right? But out of college, as I made my way through on my career path, I pretty quickly arrived at in the world of wellness and in particular fitness. So I in 2002 opened the first boutique strength training facility in Chicago. It's still there to this day. And I know, yeah, I love it. It's such a great place. And about 4 years after being the managing partner there, I sold my half knowing that I wanted to expand my capacity to contribute to people. And for me, as I considered which path forward would be the right match for me, ultimately I made my way to natural medicine, right? And in my graduate program, I actually got my first degree as a chiropractor. And in the middle of my chiropractic program, I discovered that I could really craft my approach to be more like a natural medicine internist, and really did that, and went on to get my master's of science in nutrition and functional medicine. And why I went that way was born out of the difference this work had made for me, right? I have all different kinds of healthcare providers have different great tools in their toolkit, right? This is not a me versus them or one's better than the other. It's really a question of in the moment knowing what's right when. But I really saw that for so many people, and from my own experience, my own health challenges were most often solved through taking a root cause natural approach. And, for me, it really is a truth like gravity that when we feel our best and we look our best, we can be our best. And so for me, that is what this work is all about for me is being part of people's journey to realizing their fullest potential.
Oh, amen. And there's something you said in that about the me versus them. I find in the natural health world, that paradigm of natural health versus traditional medicine brings and breeds more combative, like energetic. And that is not like, what's the aim? Like, I think
It's
if there
not
was,
useful.
if there was an aim, if I could name the aim, I would name it something like harmony. I have a little pun I like to use around harmony where I like to spell the money part as dollars, like MONEY. Because it's like, to me, that is like the radical shift that changes everything. And, the me versus them, you touched on that. But at some point, you saw traditional medicine, you saw other ways. And what was that discovery process like to you? I think for many, functional medicine, it still feels like people have never heard of functional medicine. For someone like maybe yourself, even I would consider myself, I was hearing about it like late 2000s and started doing my own self-discovery through that. But for someone that doesn't even know this exists, they hear that me versus them, we versus them, I think you get what I'm saying, but I have a lot in here, but just about that, your personal discovery to the trickles of functional medicine and why that me versus them paradigm is not helpful. Your thoughts?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so I mean, anyone who's listening to the show I would suspect there's not one of us who hasn't been miraculously gifted by the care of someone in traditional medicine. I know I have, right? As a kid, I remember getting strep throat and I remember needing antibiotics. And I also know people who came before us weren't that lucky. You know, it's not to say that is always the tool to be utilized, right? We don't just want a hammer in our toolkit. We want a variety of tools, and we want to be able to use the right one for the right situation. And, to be able to really understand and utilize interventions in an appropriate way, people are going to specialize in different things, and that's totally fine. When I work with people and people first express an interest in working together, one of the things I start with, the thing I start with is a complimentary consultation, because I want to make sure it's the right fit. There absolutely have been times where I tell someone, listen, I think you're going to be best cared for by a traditional physician. And my North Star is you thriving. And if I get to be a part of it, fabulous. But that's not my love of being a part of your health journey is not going to supersede my commitment to you thriving. That's always going to take the number one. So, that's how I look at this work and the role we all can play in supporting people and thriving. To say a little bit more about functional medicine for people who maybe that term is a little bit new, or you've heard of it, but you're not really sure what it means. I think about it as data-driven natural medicine, or data-driven root cause natural medicine. So what we're really trying to do is understand why these symptoms are showing up and peel back the layers of how your body is functioning, and better understand how we can support your healing process by, fundamentally healing your body, right? Healing different aspects, whichever is, whatever is going on for you. It's very individualized. But, just to what I opened with here is that, this is not always the right approach. Oftentimes it's a great complement to approach, work people are doing. I work with a lot of people who have autoimmune disorders. I'm not someone who is committed that people get off their thyroid medications. I don't, if there were huge, scary side effects, I'd be thinking differently, but that's just not true when we think about thyroid meds. Now, I am interested in supporting someone so that their immune system's less reactive, because once you have one autoimmune condition, you're more likely to develop another. So it doesn't mean that I'm taking the place of the thyroid medication someone's on, but it does mean we might partner to see how can we just help your body preserve its function as is, and, not have this become a downward spiral for you.
I love that. The one thing you touched on with root causes, I feel like detectives, like, let's figure out the root cause. There's such a spectrum of root causes, some that could be in your own sphere and some that could be, say, in the global or world sphere. How do you look at where the root causes could be coming from?
Oh my gosh, that is so well said, Linda, because it is, honestly, that we could just keep peeling that onion, right? So fundamentally, I start with the low-hanging fruit, right? So, and you used a word that I use when I talk to people. I say, I'm going to arrive at our first appointment with my detective's hat on, right? So it is detectives work, right?
Yes.
So, in that first conversation, that first appointment, and, I'm really listening for missing puzzle pieces, and listening for, okay, where do I believe our, low-hanging fruit with spiral up benefits is going to lie. We'll get some of that information via labs. And then also when I work with people, I actually have them track. I have them track their symptoms and their lifestyle. I have them track what they're eating and drinking, and how they're sleeping or not, and how they're moving, exercise, stress, things like that, because that gives me information that no lab company can give me. And when I see those, that can be a little bit daunting initially. People are, first of all, just the task itself, that tracking really takes a level of commitment. But also there's a level of vulnerability, right? They really have to trust that I'm in it for them, and not to have them feel badly about how they're caring for their body, which is the last thing I want people feeling. So, all of those things together, through gathering that information, we're able to see, okay, where's a great place for us to start to meaningfully shift the needle And then healing does occur on different levels, right?
Mm.
It's not just like, okay, let's replace that nutrient and everything's going to be hunky dory,
Mhm.
right? We are multifaceted beings, and we're much more than a body. So there are a lot of different things we could look at in the spectrum of healing.
And only so many of those that are in our control versus, just happening.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Right. There are people who, it's like, well, in an ideal world, you would not live in the busy city you live in. And, one of the things that I think is funny is I was talking to someone a few weeks ago, and she was saying, like, I just really like, I don't want to have to be on supplements. I was like, yeah, no problem. Go become a hunter gatherer, move to the country, and be just like reduce all stress, like get rid of your electronics. I think we can do this. She was like, what? Right? It's kind of like, yeah, we've got to meet ourselves where we are, in every
Yeah.
sense of the word.
That like exercise of wouldn't it be nice? It's like, yeah, wouldn't it be great if like the magic wand came out and it was all this is Linda's world. This is what I would do. And it's like, back to reality. This is what's really happening.
Totally, totally. And it can be very alluring to give a lot of emotional attention to the world we'd like to exist, right?
Yeah.
And we it's not that that's useless, because maybe somewhere in there we can find our own unique ways to move towards that world.
Hmm.
But some of them, as I shared before we hopped on, my husband and I, for his job, we live overseas in Switzerland. I call it working remotely. And I love being with our family in the US, and getting to see the contrast of how different countries do things is really interesting. And one of the things that I said to my husband, I was like, if the US just had amazing public transportation everywhere, like, oh yeah, good luck with that one,
Yeah.
right? We're very car based, right?
Yes.
So we can still dream and vote when possible for things like that.
Yeah. And that emotional tension, not only to the world that we wish, but the emotional tension, which can even present as like the fears and the phobias of the world we exist in. Do you have guidance for people? I think in today's world, every corner can feel like the world is about to be over. It's like that,
Yeah.
like in the climate that we live in, it could always be that climate, but it also doesn't quote unquote have to feel like that. And
Yes. Yeah.
what do you
I would
think?
say, one a good place to start is just looking at, like, okay, there's the environment we have control over, and then there's
Mhm,
the environment that we don't have control
mhm,
over. And by that first world, that environment we have control over, it's like, okay, what am I bringing in that isn't actually useful? Right? Is it really useful for me? And this is an individual question, right? People have to answer this question for themselves, because it's not
mhm,
like there are true answers. There's only
mhm,
your truth.
mhm,
Is it useful for me to watch the news, or is it more useful for me to read a newspaper? Is it useful for me to be on Instagram? Is it useful for me, just looking at what pulls us towards experiencing, like almost like a sense of despair and
mhm,
overwhelm,
mhm,
that we can protect ourselves from.
mhm.
And then, what builds our resilience in the face of, like, okay, the truth is, this is the world we're living in. Um, what builds our resilience such that we're able to be our best self and bring our best self to this world that we are living in, with all of its complexities.
I love just how you frame that, and the work you do feels the embodiment of that. And yourself as an entrepreneur, you've had businesses and had your own journey. I'm sure there's been your own growth edges for developing that resilience in what sounded like was physical, and then you found your own path into more of the nutrition and the whole body. Did you have any of your own aha moments that were like, oh, physical is great, but there's something more, like there needs to be more to this story and this conversation, if you want to share?
Yeah, well, I saw for myself, the physical world. I still love and adore the physical world.
Mhm.
Being physically active is something that brings me so much joy. And I learn so much about myself and life in this world being physically active. It's really, a form of meditation for me. Um, but like anything, if we're committed to evolving and expanding our capacity to contribute, it's always like, okay, where am I looking next that would meaningfully make a difference for people? So, in that transition for me, I really saw, okay, yes, being physically active and, strength training and all the different types of movement that are wonderful for our bodies and minds and souls. Those are great. But, to really guide an individual, I'm going to need to understand how bodies work, not just my body, but bodies, right? Physiologically speaking. And I'm going to need to be able to understand how their body is working, right? So it really led me in that direction to, get to the point where I went back to graduate school to get tooled up to be able to guide people in front of them based on their bodies rather than make recommendations based on what worked for me or, just generalities rather than being much more specific, targeted, and therefore effective.
I love that. Specific to entrepreneurship, there can be a lot of uncertainty and stress. I feel like entrepreneurship is just the journey of problems. You're focusing on solving a core problem, and then you're focused on solving all the problems that make up your business. And like that's the whole journey. And for someone that doesn't like problem solving or doesn't kind of understand that yet, that resilience or lack of, and the feeling of just so much resistance. We see this in the form of imposter syndrome and self-sabotage. I mean, there's so many layers to it. But how does the work that you do help parent to build up, this could apply beyond entrepreneurship, but I like to just talk about that for a moment for entrepreneurs tuning in, wherever they are on their entrepreneurial path.
Yeah, I mean, everything you said, Linda, is true about like the entrepreneurial journey. And also, I would add, like, it's such an opportunity to be fully self-expressed. I'm grateful for having had periods of my life. Most of my life, I have been an entrepreneur, but I have had periods where I've worked for other people, and where that's been useful for me is to be able to sit on both sides of the table, right? And kind of know, sitting in the spot of an employee, there's so many things I don't have to worry about that they're worrying about right now, and that has its loveliness. But at the end of the day, this being at the source of creating something and looking at how to partner with people in contributing, that I find so joyful. I find that so joyful. And yeah, just like in the area of health, it's like, okay, where is my edge, right? If there are outcomes I want to produce, and how many people I'm touching with this work, and how many people I'm working with, and building programs and stuff like that, I'm going to confront myself. I'm going to be the biggest barrier. And not right, wrong, good, bad, just true. So ultimately it's a gateway to like, okay, if I'm really devoted to this, then I am committing to evolving in so many different ways. I'm committing to learn new things that I don't know right now. I'm committing to begin knowing myself in a way I don't know myself right now. And I'm committing to, be at the source of having me do things that are currently really hard and make me want to throw a temper tantrum because I quote unquote have to do them, except I only have to do them because I said I was committed to an outcome. Right. So I think I love it. I love being an entrepreneur.
I do too. It's so funny. I'm sure there's a meme for this, but it's like, the first couple, it could be months or years, and like you don't even kind of realize what's happening, that what you just explained is even going on. And then it does feel to me like the hero's journey, or just this like, just really intense, intimate journey with yourself, seeing all the ways that you show up and all the ways that you do or don't care for yourself, all the ways of things that aren't productive. I mean, there's a lot of layers and levels, and that deeper intimacy that you get to develop along the way, that alone feels worth it, and then all the other things. It's quite the journey.
Definitely. And it's a funny thing. It's like when I'm doing my work, I do experience it, you know, it's not like it's one of the, I feel like my best self, right? I'm so devoted to this work. And, you know, when we go on vacation, certainly there are times where I take time off, but
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I choose to see a few people while I'm on vacation because I really have that experience of, you know, bringing my best self forward and then bringing it with me throughout the day. And I love it.
Yeah, I love that. And you can see that when the work shows in that way, you can see that. And to me, when that's not happening, that's that misalignment and like the even deeper discovery of where, how can you access that? There's something that you wrote that I want to read here that really, really hit me. Uh, if you're struggling in the area of health, you didn't invent your perspective on your body and food and your health. You inherited it. The inherited, broken, all or nothing paradigm is born of self-aggression. Authoring a new journey is one of mastering your middle ground and is born of self-love. I have to say, when I read this, the irony, I've been exploring some other deeper layers of myself, and I made this big proclamation to my husband actually this morning where I said, I'm being on the hunt for any ways that I neglect or abuse myself that are subtle. So I'm doing this discovery work, and I just want to give you a heads up because there's a zero tolerance policy, and it's not just for with me and myself, it's anyone to me as well. And it was just, you know, it was not directed at him in any way. And this is just where my personal journey has dropped me off at this week. And it just, when you wrote self-aggression, it's so subtle. It can be so unknown. And I found myself at some point in the past 12 hours in this very like this energy of like do and intense, and it felt aggressive. And I took a deep breath and I was like, I don't need to be in that right now. Like I don't need to be in that
Mm.
pattern. And I just kind of stepped out of it and, you know, got into a different space. But there's some subtleties, and in what I just read that you shared is packed with so much. But speaking to just the inherited piece, the all or nothing paradigm, and this self-aggression that can be contributors to health outcomes and the way that you see that, and just beautifully written.
Yeah, well, thank you. And you know what, that all or nothing paradigm, I think a lot of people, and especially a lot of women,
Mhm.
can relate to
Mhm.
this experience of all or nothing, right? And all or nothing is lived as overindulgence or deprivation,
Mm.
overindulgence or deprivation, right? And we inherited a, you know, viewpoint in this area of health, a perspective that those are the options, right?
Mhm.
And you can see this by something like the Whole 30, right? People do the Whole 30, and on day 31 they have a pizza and a bottle of wine, or you know, like that, right? Just as an
Mhm.
example, right? But that real sway back and forth, either throw the baby out with the bathwater or just white knuckle it and be quote unquote perfect, right? And the thing about this approach, this overindulgence or deprivation, this all or nothing approach, is that it doesn't work, right? It doesn't work for producing outcomes, and it certainly doesn't work for having people feeling empowered, right? It
Mhm.
really is an expression of self aggression. So, just simply put, seeing it in your life, is, you start to gain some faculty. You stop being, you cease to be owned by it when you begin to be able to see it, right? So that's the
Mhm.
first thing. Now, okay, what is a different way of journeying? A different way of journeying would be to self author your journey. And where we would start with that really is by getting clear on your intention for your health and your life. Your intention. I call this authoring your vision of vitality for your health and your life. And with that in mind, you would begin a whole new journey that's ultimately a conversation. And the conversation is one of reflection on the question, what is most aligned, or what's more aligned? Maybe even
Mhm.
not most aligned, but what's more aligned with
Mhm.
my intention for my health and my life. And when you're moving in that kind of a journey, you're going to naturally find your middle ground. You're going to find you're not too tight and not too loose. And that really is a journey of self-love because it's so self-honoring. You're clear what your intention is and you're honoring it.
That intention, because it's easy to get looped into the chaos and the old ways, but the power of the intention, the vision, letting that really pull you. But beyond any of that, it's like the recentering. Like, no, I'm committed to da 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 da. I'm committed to feeling energized and vitality. Okay, like then snapping back into that versus getting so off course. And that practice can't just happen once a month for it to be effective.
Totally. It is a lived practice, right? And most people have spent their whole lives practicing the all or nothing approach, right? And so it's gonna take something to step into a whole new way of relating to your health and your body and your life. And, to author a new way of being born of self-love, there's not just one thing, right? There are hundreds, thousands of different things people will see over time in their journey, including what you shared about like, okay, zero tolerance policy, right?
That's the all or nothing again, but
but I understand what you're saying, right? You're looking for, where am I dishonoring myself, or where am I allowing myself to be dishonored?
Yeah, the line, like, hey, this needs to be illuminated and very clear, and it may not be all or nothing in the first go, but it's just like, hey, we can see this, and this is huge on the awareness, and some of these patterns can take time to untether, but you have to even see them. And I think that was what I was sharing. It was like I could see, and then it's like, oh, this is so subtle. I couldn't even tell. I wasn't like doing this purposefully to hurt myself, but some of it can be locked in from, I mean, not some of it, I think most of it. You talk about the just ancestral element and the inherited piece, like it's deeper than what we may know initially.
Absolutely. There's so many layers. There are so many layers. But, if we can just start to identify the conversations and the ways we're relating to ourselves and our health and how we're fueling ourselves or not, or what we're drinking or not, or how we're sleeping or not, whatever it is that sounds to you, like, like you, the listener, okay, I see that in that area, I'd be willing to take a first step, right? Because it is it's like crossing the monkey bars, right? If you're devoted to authoring a new journey, if you're devoted to, getting clear on your intention and living consistent with it, it's like crossing the monkey bars of change, which means you're going to fall off the monkey bars sometimes. It's okay. That's okay. The most important thing about falling off the monkey bars is, first of all, getting back on quickly and learning, just what had me fall, get curious so that you can take that and put it to use. But, with that same analogy is, as you start to cross the monkey bars of change, you want to think about, what is one step I could take that would move me towards my intended health, my intended vitality, my intended experience of life and of myself. And just begin that practice. It does not need to be, in fact, especially initially, I would encourage it not be heroic. It could be just as simple as, I'm going to set aside a minute in the morning to just be with myself before I hit the ground running,
That the 1 minute, I shared this story of my first meditation. I remember it was years ago when I was starting to hear more and more about meditation. And I thought, all right, I can tell this is the next thing for me to try, or my next tool in the toolkit. And I did my first meditation. It was 1 minute, and I was crawling out of my skin. Like I could not. And I remember getting to the end of the minute, and I was like, I did it. I meditated. And, like the most stoic meditator would probably have criticism of like, not really, that wasn't really quote unquote meditation. But for me in that moment, it absolutely was. And that was, say, in 2013 or 14. And eventually, I think I've been daily meditating since 2017, right? And like it went from 1 minute to now 7 years, or however the math works out, of daily meditation. And I didn't sit in that moment saying, I want to be a daily meditator for 20 years. I was sitting down like, I'm going to try to meditate for 1 minute. And it's like the most painful experience ever. And then, time goes on and it softens. And now definitely doesn't feel like that.
Yeah. And a few things I love about that story, Linda. One is you met yourself where you were,
Mhm.
right? Like you didn't say, okay, well, if I don't do an hour, it doesn't count. Like that would have been an absurd consideration at that moment in time,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like not appropriate. So you
Yeah.
met yourself where you were
Mhm.
and you celebrated yourself for your win. Like
Mhm.
forget what anyone else. No, it's nobody's business except for
Yes.
you. If
Yes.
you consider it a win, then you celebrate it. Just like if you think about a little kiddo, we've all seen a toddler learning to walk.
Mhm.
And when that little toddler falls down, what do you do? Except cheer that they get
Yeah.
back up
Right.
because they just took a few
Yay.
steps. They took
Yeah.
2 steps. Yay, they just took two
Yeah.
steps, right? So it's, embodying that for yourself, being that kind of, genuine, not BS, but genuine support system for yourself.
And even that process can be awkward and new, like to be your own cheerleader in that and getting that rhythm down within your own kind of psyche and language of like, keep going, I got this, when there's voices that could have been different and not that got you to that moment. And so then there's a new paradigm within the self that's emerging. So a couple of things that you're an expert in: natural weight mastery, which seems to be a very hot topic in 2024, digestive distress, constipation, diarrhea, bloating, some words we really try not to say out loud, hormonal balancing, that I think is so important, and then skin challenges, acne, rosacea, rashes. There's a lot of nuance, there's a lot of individualization. I have a sense that all of these could be connected. And you've mentioned your initial intake of really getting in that detective discovery hat and doing that work. But I'm curious if you notice any patterns that show up for these four and how you approach them. Like, how did you become an expert in these? And we'll see what threads unfold from that. I have a lot of questions.
Yeah. No, those are great questions, Linda. So one of the things, a few different things that I'd speak to, a few things that can be commonly at the source
Mm-hmm.
of all of these health shenanigans, whether
Mm-hmm.
it's weight or hormones or digestion or skin. Um, One is inflammation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And inflammation is often spoken about, when I meet with people, people will often say, I'm just really inflamed. And I'll ask them what that feels like in their body. And maybe they'll
Mm.
say, my skin is red and itchy, or I feel bloated, or my knees hurt, or something like that. But the truth is that most people who have elevated inflammation have no symptoms or no known symptoms,
Mm.
right? So inflammation is a knowable, measurable phenomenon. It's, we kind of talk about it, like throw it around like the word detox, which is also a noble physiological phenomenon, but
Mm-hmm.
story for another day. But
Okay.
anyway, the inflammation we can measure, right? So with in all of these cases, one of the things I'm going to look at for different reasons, for different conditions, is inflammation. Is
Mm-hmm.
inflammation perpetuating a cycle of weight loss resistance? Is it
Mm-hmm.
perpetuating skin challenges, whether that's acne or rosacea or psoriasis? Is it perpetuating digestive distress, or hormone disruption imbalance? So inflammation definitely can be playing a role in that. And we measure that through a few different ways, but just to mention two of the lab values that I look at in these situations. One is called HSCRP. Fancy term is high sensitivity C-reactive protein, but that HSCRP is a measurement of inflammation. I like to see it under 1.5 or less. Another one is called homocysteine, which is often not looked at as a marker of inflammation, but I do look at it as a marker of inflammation. And I like to see that between 6 and 8. So what I consider optimal is not always lab normal.
Mm-hmm.
Lab normal and optimal are two very different things.
Mm-hmm.
So that's definitely one thing. Some of the other common threads that you might see in these seemingly not, unrelated conditions. One would be a disruption to the microbiome. So our microbiome it's the bugs that live in us and on us. And over 80% of our microbiome lives in our colon, also known as our large intestines. I thought that was fun. I didn't until I was in grad school, I didn't know that was the same part of the body. Colon and large intestines, same part of the body. So there you go.
Got the same thing there. Yep.
Right. Exactly. So your microbiome mostly lives there. And for a variety of reasons, there can be disruptions to the microbiome. And that can show up as weight loss resistance. That can show up in the skin. That can certainly show up as digestive distress. And, that can show up as hormonal imbalances too. So that would be number two. Number three would be the whole camp of nutrient insufficiencies or deficiencies. So this would be things like magnesium or vitamin D or omega-3 fatty acids or B12 or folate or zinc or, so lots of different things we could point to. But fundamentally speaking, all of these nutrients do something really important for our body, whether it's supporting our adrenals in a healthy stress response and a healthy blood sugar, whether it's supporting hormone production and hormone sensitivity, so the producing of the message and the receiving of the message, or whether it's supporting skin healing or our immune system. So a lot of different things, but the whole world of optimizing nutrients is definitely a low-hanging fruit for all of those symptoms and conditions.
And when you're looking at these labs, I'm imagining, you've had clients, you see patterns, you see common themes to some of these lab works. I know everyone's different, but is it exactly what you already shared? Is this is why you're checking those, is because that's going to be the most obvious? Are there any patterns that you're seeing in that you're 80% of patients usually have da 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 da, and why that's important? I'm being nerdy with the data right now.
Yeah, no, not at all. I would say all of those, I never know what I'm going to see.
Okay.
Right. And so I really do I get excited when I get a notification that I have new labs, because I'm like, oh my God,
where are we at?
Right? Yeah, exactly. It's solving the puzzle. It's doing the detective work, right? So I never know what I'm going to see. Otherwise, I wouldn't have to do the labs, right?
Right.
But really, the numbers are powerful, and it's we don't want to guess. We want to do the testing. We want to get the data and act based on what the numbers say for us. I was meeting with a patient earlier today, and one of her more recent symptoms that she hasn't had before was she's had some panic attacks. And not only was that awful, but of course, it had her panicked that she would have more panic attacks, understandably so. And for her, again, it's not just one thing, but it made really good sense when I saw her labs. Her B12 values were low, and that plays a really important role in our production of neurotransmitters, as well as how nerves function themselves and communicate. Her omega-3 fatty acids were low. There are great studies around mood and anxiousness and all things about our mental well-being and omega-3 fatty acids. Her vitamin D was just barely lab normal. That's a far cry from optimal. So for her, magnesium was super low. So we found all these points of leverage. And I wouldn't have known, and it could have been that we didn't find any there. It could have been that for her, maybe her microbiome was, really throwing her neurotransmitters for a loop. But, that we always learn something actionable and interesting in these labs.
So if I went to my primary care physician in the US, likely they're not running the advanced labs. And I have a sense that many people don't understand that that's an option or how to access that. So around the labs, I'll pause with that question, how to get proper labs, obviously working with you as a way to do that. But there's a bit of a conundrum. How do we find the data if that's not what's being run through traditional healthcare?
Yeah, but definitely, obviously I love it when I get to be a part of someone's journey, but that, there are tons of great Institute of Functional Medicine certified practitioners. I'm an IFMCP, Institute of Functional Medicine certified practitioner. Mark Hyman, a lot of your listeners have probably heard of him. He's one of our great practitioners as well. And so if you look up IFMCP, you can look up certified practitioners on IFM's website, and you can look at who is a possibility for you. But unfortunately, there just really aren't. Traditional medicine, it's just not in their toolkit, right? If you think you have strep throat, you want to go there. You think you burst your appendix, go to the ER right now. Please do not call me. Like things like that, right?
Yeah.
But this is just not, this isn't in their toolkit. And again, I don't think of that as bad. I just think it's useful to know, like, okay, I'm not going to go to the hairdresser to have my teeth cleaned, and I'm not going to go to my dentist to get my hair cut. It's just how it works.
And knowing that this is even an avenue for optimization, like understanding that this exists, and obviously our listeners are understanding that this exists. You mentioned some of the lab testing, and in that example of a client, some of her deficiencies. How often do you recommend the testing happen, and how long does it typically take for the lifestyle changes or the supplements or the modifications to show results that they can feel and then see through the data?
Yeah, great question. So in the way of how often to have lab tests, when I start working with someone, right, we're going to do a really comprehensive assessment based on their needs, based on what we discover are the missing puzzle pieces. And once I have that information, then we're going to retest select numbers. So numbers we're looking to affect, because inevitably there are going to be some numbers that we're like, not your thyroid looks
good.
great, yeah, exactly. In which case I say, let's check that annually, right? If it looks great, we're going to check it annually. If we're trying to move the needle, it'll depend a little bit on what the gap is, right? I mentioned inflammation. Is your inflammation 2.3 or is it 8.5?
Wow.
That last one, we're gonna keep a tight leash on that guy. We're gonna check that probably at least twice, every 2 months to make sure the needle is moving, right? Versus 2.5, if that's what we're working with, that's we can handle that. We would give you a little longer leash on that example. So typically, if their numbers we're looking to move, we're going to check it initially every 2 to 3 months, because of course I want you feeling better, but we want to see the objective evidence of your body's healing. We want to see these numbers moving. And if they're not moving, we're missing something, right? So we definitely want to see that. But at a certain point, my wish for people is that it become like an annual exam, right? Awesome. Okay, your annual functional medicine exam. And that's what I do with a lot of people is, I want people getting to a place where they know how to care for their body to produce the outcomes they care the most about. They're doing that with, they're actually doing that. They don't just know theoretically, but they're actually have integrated that into their life. And then we're just, touching base once a year or so to keep them rolling along. Now you asked another question. What was the second question you asked, Linda?
It was about how long. I think you answered it. It was how frequently to test, and then how often or how quickly could you start seeing a shift from the modifications and the supplements?
Yeah. So it depends on the number, on what we're looking at in particular, right? There's some metrics associated with heart health that we might not see shifts for like 4 to 6 months.
Okay.
But then there are others that'll certainly be like, 8 to 12 weeks. So it just depends on the person and where they are, right? For example, there are certainly some people who I've worked with who I've said to them, listen, I actually really think you should be on statins, right? Cholesterol medication, because I'm concerned about your heart health. And they come back and they say, I don't want to, right? And I say, okay, fine. Then we got to get down to business. And if this hasn't sufficiently moved in 8 weeks, you have to promise me you'll reconsider that, because your health and safety is my number one priority. And so in that case, we'll get rolling hot and heavy and keep a close eye on it to make sure it is shifting.
Which that just feels such a grounded approach, and just the way you're using that data to paint the picture, not only of where they're going, but how we talked earlier, like meeting someone truly where they are, but being able to show like, this is where you're at right now, and then creating that optimal path from there. And it just makes it all make even more sense.
Yeah. We never want to stick our head in the sand, right? We want to get the information and get in action around it.
So the sticking the head in the sand, this is something that is a default mode, I think, around healthcare. There's a lot of reasons why that could happen, so many reasons. But for anyone that's listening, that's sticking their head in the sand right now about something, what would be your advice to them?
Well, can you identify what information you need to gather to
Mm,
better understand what's going on? Or can you identify what question
mhm,
you need to answer? Because you may not know exactly what information.
mhm,
It may be something like, do I need to see my GP or an endocrinologist or a functional medicine physician? I don't know,
mhm,
So maybe there's a question that would just help you, when answered, go to the next step.
mhm,
Right. So if you've been, whether it's you've been dealing with, a digestive distress for 4 years and you've just decided it would miraculously go away, but it hasn't,
mhm.
or
Or it's
you're,
normal, like that's just normal. This
yeah,
is the way
yeah,
I
yeah,
am, you know?
right. I just poop 2 days a week. That's it.
Yeah,
That's normal.
that's
Yeah,
just
right.
me. That's how my body
Yeah,
works.
yeah. My favorite is when I meet with people and they actually don't come to see me, like in that example for constipation,
Uh,
like they're coming to see me for something totally different. And then when we start talking about digestion, they're
uh,
like, oh yeah, just like 2 times a week. I'm like, what? No,
not
it's just my
enough.
norm, right? Anyway,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
So an
But yeah,
announcement too
really,
here, if you're pooping twice a week, you may want to go more. There's an option to go more.
that's right.
Yeah.
There's definitely, we're not just what we eat, we're what we don't excrete. We
Yep.
reabsorb those toxins.
Wow. Yeah.
So just think about that. But yeah, so really, if you are someone who you're like, oh yeah, I am sticking my head in the sand. Just first of all, just like, got it, like, not bad you.
Hmm.
Right. There are a lot of reasons why anyone might stick their head in the sand. They don't know where to start. They're overwhelmed. They're afraid. Totally part of being human.
Hmm.
So my first encouragement is to be kind and gentle with yourself, and then come up with, okay, what is the next baby step that would move me in the right direction to understanding what's
The
going on here.
one thing.
Just the one thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which is
Mm-hmm.
such a parallel to so much of business. It's like you're taking the next action. Just let's do the one thing. And I see a lot of parallels to the business journey and the health journey. One of them is this idea of give. Like there's lag time and there's give. Like this isn't just an immediate feedback loop. There's some wiggle room here to work with. And I exploring this maybe more in a meta sense, like where does this come from? Because like there's just so much give, and it took a long time to get to this moment, so it's so malleable, but it feels so urgent and like it has to happen today, and it's now or never, when it's that's not true. There's a lot of give, there's a lot of lag time, we got a lot of room for correction here, and just culturally how that can feel so intense, and then it goes into like the shaming and the guilt because they're not taking the action, and that cycle, something I'm just, chewing
Yeah.
on.
Right. Well, I will say, my husband and I, we've been here in Switzerland for about 2.5 years now.
Uh,
And it's been eye-opening on
uh,
that one because, oh my gosh, Linda, it has made me realize what total spazzes we are. Like, we
wow.
Americans, we are a unique breed. And I mean, I am in that category. So
Yes.
that it's not like, just because we live here doesn't mean I'm not as American as everybody else, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, it cracks me up and also really inspires me the way people slow down and they really let their life be about a lot more than producing results and outcomes,
Mm-hmm.
and working themselves to the bone. I mean, to the point where I the other day I was thinking, I'm like, I should start. I don't really know how to do those bubbles on Instagram where you can, like, have your own little story bubble, like in a unique category. For my business,
Yes,
my
yeah.
my awesome marketing gal Sarah does the bubbles, and we together create the content. But anyway, for my personal one, I was like, I should do one that just is taking photos of store hours in Switzerland because it's hilarious. I walked by a store the other day that's open on Friday from 12 to 5 and on Saturday from 10 to 4. That's it.
That's
Those
it.
are the only times it's open. I was like,
let that be an inspiration. If you need to set boundaries, that it's possible.
yes, it is possible. It is possible. So yeah, I think it's however we can help remind ourselves that our life is supposed to be about so much more than, meeting goals that we've set for ourselves or we think the world has set for us. And really just thinking about like, okay, what do I want my day-to-day and moment-to-moment experience to be about? And what do I want people to be left with when I interact with them? And what do I want to be left with when I interact with people also? And there's a certain number of straws on the camel back that at a certain, at that point, it's like, good luck being grounded in your intention or your commitments when you've got too many straws on your back. It's just at a certain point, there's only so much we can take.
Yeah, it will break. Full circle to the chiropractic in the back.
That's right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Dr. Jessie Hehmeyer, thank you so much. Is there the best place for someone to meet you and also your one-on-one health audit and your upcoming course, Mastering Your Middle Ground, Ditching the All or Nothing Approach to Your Health? So for those of you that are like, wait, that's a possibility, it is. Dr. Hehmeyer will share that. But where can people find you and access these amazing offerings?
Yeah, so you can find me at wellempowered.com. You can schedule a complimentary consultation there. You can also sign up for, to receive our mailings because we deliver a lot of webinars for free and have a lot of great resources that whether you're ready to engage or not, I would love for you to be able to access those things. And then, on our website, if you are interested in participating in the upcoming course, fill out that contact form as well, because that'll be for that.
So good.
As well. And then on Instagram at Well Empowered.
Well Empowered. Easy to find. And we'll have those links in the show notes as well. Thank you all so much for tuning in. And thank you again for being here. So many gems. I probably could say this about every show that you could re-listen, you could do 2x for part of it, but make sure you catch these key points that are just shining in for your life to listen to, and you take that one next step. And with that, any closing thoughts before we wrap today?
It has been a pleasure being here with you, Linda. Thank you for the work you do to make this world a better place. And I mean that sincerely. And it's been a pleasure to be here with you, your community.
Awesome. Received. We'll see you all next time on the Lila Life Show. Have a great day.